as we go through the Mishnah of Megillah, we're presented with a tension between the diaspora and life in the diaspora and life in the temple and memories of life in the temple. And we're going to see these two themes run right through the first, we're going to see these two themes run right through the whole of the tractate of Megillah, but they're particularly apparent. The memories of the temple, in particular, are most apparent in the first chapter. And so we'll see the focus go backwards and forwards. Now, we learned in the first couple of Mishnayot that in the large towns, they read on the 14th of Adar, whereas in the villages, they bring everything forward to the Monday or the Thursday, because people gather on Mondays and Thursdays, either because it's a market day or because the courts are sitting, or, probably that's why we read Torah on Mondays and Thursdays. So we need to distinguish between a large town and a village. By the way, none of this applies today, because today we treat everyone as being in a large town. We don't move forward to Monday and Thursday now. But then they needed to make the distinction. And so the Mishnah asks, Eizehi ir gdola? What is a big town? And the Mishnah answers, Kol sheyesh ba asara vatlanim. Any town that has got 10 idlers, 10 people who just sit around. A batlan is someone who doesn't have a job, someone who's unemployed. A town with 10 idlers is a proper town. It's very funny. In England, a cathedral city is a city is a town with a cathedral. Anyway, a large town in the Mishnah has got 10 idlers. And the Rambam explains in his comment on this Mishnah, he says, 10 idlers, what are they? Batlanim hu sheyu b'beit hakneset b'nei adam shelo tiyeh lahem shum melacha. That there should be 10 men in the synagogue that don't have any work. These are unemployed people. They don't have shum malacha, ela iskei tzibur, other than the business of the community, v'talmud Torah, and study of Torah, ukviut b'veit hakneset, and permanence in the synagogue. So in other words, we've got 10 people who we can rely on kind of to make up a minyan, and when we need them for something to do with the community, we've got them there. That's the definition of a town. Pachot mikan harei ze kfar. Fewer than that, it's a village. That means it's a village, and they advanced on Mondays or Thursday. Ba'elu amru maktimin velo ma'acharin. And in respect of these, that is to say the villages, they say we advance, but we don't postpone. Remember, we bring forward the reading of the Megillah to the preceding Monday or Thursday, but we don't let it delay. However, bringing forward is something we don't always do. There are some mitzvot that we'll postpone rather than bringing forward. So we've said already that we don't read the Megillah on Shabbat. We're afraid about carrying the Megillah in the public domain. So we don't read it on Shabbat. We'll bring it forward to the preceding Friday, or if it's a village, to the preceding Thursday. But there are other mitzvot that we let delay. So aval, zman atzei kohanim, the time of bringing the wood. So different families, I think there were 9 families that used to bring the wood for the priests, and they all had their own dates. They all had specified dates for bringing the wood for the sacrifices. But if, obviously you can't bring the wood on Shabbat, but if their day fell on Shabbat, they delay it. They wouldn't bring it forward. V'tisha b'av, and the 9th of Av. If the 9th of Av falls on Shabbat, we don't bring forward the fast, we delay. We don't like to bring forward a sad event. We'd rather delay a sad event. Chagiga, the Chagiga sacrifice, we bring on the Chagiga sacrifice is one of the sacrifices on Yom Tov, but we don't bring it when Yom Tov falls on Shabbat. We've actually got a whole week after the festival to bring the Chagiga. The Hakel is the big assembly once every 7 years after Sukkot, and the king reads from the Sefer Torah to the whole people. Nowadays, actually, I believe the president of the state of Israel goes to the Western Wall. He reads from Sefer Devarim. Hakel, it's the day after Sukkot, but if it falls on Shabbat, we're not going to bring everyone together on Shabbat. It's complicated, so we delay it to the day after. All of these things, ma'acharin velo makdimin, we delay them, but we don't advance them. Even though they said advance but don't postpone, we're now back to Purim. Even though they said we advance but we don't postpone, it's permissible to mourn and to fast and to distribute gifts to the poor on the days when we advance them to. So in other words, if we bring the Megillah reading forward to a Monday or forward to a Thursday, we can still mourn and fast on that day, even though we generally wouldn't do that on Purim. And Rabbi Yehuda says, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Matai, when does this all happen? In a place where people gather on Mondays and Thursdays. So now we're getting specific here, and we can see we just don't do this today. In places where people don't gather on Mondays and Thursdays, and I guess we would apply that to our settlements today. Ein korin ota ela bizmana. We only read the Megillah at its proper time. And remember, we learned that there's a verse from the Megillah saying that the Megillah is going to be read bizmanehem, in their times. So bizmana is really a quotation from Megillat Esther. Generally, we read the Megillah at the proper time. And that's why the Mishnah spends so much of its early effort just in analyzing what time it should be. What about if we don't know what month it is? So we know it's the 11th, the 12th, the 13th, the 14th, or the 15th of the month. But what month is it? Because, of course, you can have two Adars, two different. And this year, by the way, the month of Adar will come twice. So they read the Megillah during the first Adar. And then the year was made a leap year. So in the time of the Mishnah, the Bet Din could decide to make a leap year right up till the end of Adar, even after Purim. So you could have read the Megillah for Purim, Adar Rishon, and then you could be told, oh, hang on, there's going to be a second Adar. So what do? The Mishnah answers, Korina Tab Adar Hasheni. We've read it once. We're going to read it again in the second Adar. Interesting. There seems to be some intrinsic connection between Purim and Pesach. I mean, I had a Rav who used to say that unless you were able to kind of release your inhibitions and get happy on Purim, you weren't in a state to become a free man on Pesach. He used to interpret this connection from a psychological point of view. I'm sure there are other interpretations, but certainly from a calendrical point of view, there's an intrinsic connection between Purim and Pesach. They have to be 1 month apart. Maybe it's that people used to count the days between Purim and Pesach because they didn't have printed calendars. But there's an intrinsic connection, and we have to read it again the second time round. Ein bein Adar harishon la'Adar hasheni. There's no difference between the first Adar and the second Adar. Eila kriyat ha-Megillah u'matanot la'avyonim. There's no difference other than the reading of the Megillah and the giving of gifts to the poor. In other words, suggesting that on the first Adar, on the 14th and the 15th, we actually wouldn't make a eulogy or we wouldn't fast, because in some way that day does include some element of Purim. And this expression, Ein bein Adar harishon la'Adar hasheni. There's no difference between the first Adar and the second Adar, but ... This expression, Ein bein, then introduces a whole series of Mishnayot, which all begin with Ein bein. And the subject matter is incredibly diverse, and it will run until the end of the chapter. But they all begin with the expression Ein Bain. And some people talk about the Ein Bains. You know, it's a famous sort of famous series of Mishnayot. They're poetically connected. Well, we can ask ourselves whether they're connected in terms of meaning. We can ask ourselves that, but they're definitely poetically connected. And we begin. Ein bein Yom Tov l'Shabbat eila ochel nefesh bilavad. There's no difference between Shabbat and Yom Tov except the preparation of food. This Mishnah, by the way, goes to according to Beit Shammai, because of course we follow Beit Hillel, and we know there are differences between Shabbat and Yom Tov. There's lots of small differences. We learned them in the Mishnah of Beitza in terms of what we can do on Shabbat and Yom Tov, and certainly the big difference that we carry on Yom Tov. We carry on Yom Tov because of Beit Hillel. We do not go according to this Mishnah and Beit Shammai, but we repeat it because it's a lovely Ein Bain. Ein Bain Yom Tov l'Shabbat eila ochel nefesh bilvad. There's no difference between Shabbat and Yom Tov except the preparation of food. Ein Bain Shabbat l'Yom Kippurim eila shezeh zdono b'imdei adam v'zeh zdono b'karet. There's no difference between Shabbat and Yom Kippur. Now, we know, of course, there's a massive difference between Shabbat and Yom Kippur. So you can see already, this is a poetic rendering. But the Mishnah says, Ein Bain, there's no difference between Shabbat and Yom Kippur, except if we intentionally violate one of them, we're punished by a human court. The punishment for breaking Shabbat in public is delivered by the court. V'zeh zdono b'charet. And the deliberate violation, the intentional violation of Yom Kippur is karet. It's this mysterious cutting off. We don't quite know what it is, but it's something that is in the hands of heaven. It's not in the hands of the human court.